I'm here to talk about conventions and resolutions specifically for conventions, and I've got about 30 minutes, so I've got to watch the clock because this is a dangerous topic for me. I could talk about conventions for 3 hours if you let me. So going over what we're going to talk about today, how Republican conventions work in Texas, how to write resolutions for conventions, and how to actually get them through the convention to make a difference in the platform. So let me ask you this. How many of you have not been through a convention cycle before as a delegate? Are there any complete newbies? Okay, a few newbies. So I'll sort of watch you guys to see if I've puzzled you. I know on the other end of the spectrum, we've got the Rhonda Lacey's who have been to many, many conventions over the years. How many of you have been to more than, say, 5 state conventions? That's a good number of y'all. Okay. So we've got some newbies, we've got some veterans. Let's talk about the timetable for conventions. So precinct conventions occur on or after the first Tuesday in March. Well, what's special about the first Tuesday in March in Texas? It's the primary. I know Fort Bend, I was talking to Bobby before to confirm this because I had heard this, that Fort Bend does their precinct conventions on the same day as their SD convention. So that's a logistical challenge for someone from my perspective, although I think they do it very well. So just a different way of doing that. In Harris County, we have those precinct conventions. Used to be on Tuesday night right after the primary. Well, we can't do that anymore in Harris County because we've got voting centers now and we don't have locations, and our poll workers are often assigned many miles away from their own precincts. So we moved for the first time in Harris County to Saturday after the primary precinct conventions, and we did them in groups. So we were able to share some of the organizational effort. That's something that we plan to do again in Harris County. I know Brazoria County, talking to Becky and Shane, believe they do Saturday conventions right after the primary, same as Harris. And then I don't know what Matagorda and some of the other counties in 17 do. So you want to make sure that for people in other counties, they need to make sure that they're in touch with their county party to know what the program is there. However, regardless of what your precinct conventions are scheduled to do, county and SD conventions are uniform throughout the state. Those all occur on the 4th Saturday in March. Next year, that will be on March 23rd. Now, if you've been through convention cycles and you've been involved in the planning of it, you're used to having about 3 weeks between your precinct convention and your SD convention or county convention. Well, guess what? You've lost a week this year. We have a late primary, just the way that the calendar works. So if you are involved in that convention process, get ready because you've got to work really quickly to get your organizational stuff together. Fort Bend, of course, doesn't have that problem because they've got precinct conventions day of. State convention is going to be in San Antonio in May. And for those of you who are able to make the additional step, Milwaukee is where the RNC is going to be this year, or next year in July. So, why is Texas special? Reason number 4 million and whatever. Well, compared to a lot of other states, I don't know how many of you guys realize this, that the grassroots actually drive party policy. And we pride ourselves in Texas as a Republican Party of Texas of being a bottom-up party, that we let the grassroots dictate our policy. Our leaders are elected by the grassroots. We don't have the smoke-filled rooms where Shane and Rhonda and I make all the decisions. Those who are elected to be leaders in the party, the platform that we write, that's all determined by the grassroots. So as I say here, your participation is what drives the party, and those of us who are blessed to be in the leadership, we try not to forget that. We try to remember that we're just a vehicle for the grassroots, that really the grassroots drive the car here. And the platform in particular is something that I think, for those of you who've been involved, we're very proud of it, right? Because it comes from the grassroots. It's our mechanism for telling our legislators, these are the things that we care about as conservatives in Texas and that we want to see concrete progress on. So that platform is not generated out of thin air. It comes from the work of hundreds and hundreds of precinct conventions around the state and county and SD conventions around the state. Anybody unclear about the difference between a county and an SD convention? Do I need to clarify that for anyone? Okay, so you guys are well versed in that. Let's talk about rules. So you can't get away from rules if you're involved in conventions. There's several things that become the rules for conventions, and they sort of work together in an interplay. So first of all, you've got Texas election code. Some of you are, county chairs are really familiar with Texas election code. In particular, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, you don't have to, but if you want to be a well-schooled delegate, Chapter 174 is where you need to look. Also, a little bit of 171 in there too. But if you've not read Texas election code before, it's very dry, but it's also very informative. And if you're involved as an election worker, if you're involved working with your county chair, or sometimes working with the campaign, but definitely with conventions, you want to be familiar with Texas election code and where to find stuff. Republican Party of Texas rules. Wow, might be really boring, but this document is a process that comes together every 2 years, is amended every 2 years at state convention. Beautifully formatted, by the way. But RPT rules, about, I would say 2/3 of the rules talk about conventions. That's how important conventions are from the perspective of the Republican Party of Texas. And Becky and Roman and those of us who have been on the SREC, and Tina and Rhonda, we know that really the delegates are the determining factor of what the party policy is. The SREC is just the between conventions body that represents those that elect us at state conventions. So very, very important that we always remember that we are a grassroots party. And those rules that come together every 2 years are vitally important when it comes to conventions and the governing of those conventions. A third item is the whatever your county executive committee decides. So, Brazoria County is going to have its local policies that involve conventions. Bobby in Fort Bend, Matagorda, Harris, we all have slightly different things, but those county executive committees are going to make decisions, whether it's 2 weeks before or 6 months in advance, to make sure that our conventions run smoothly. And for those of you who have done any parliamentary procedure, been involved in groups that do parliamentary procedure, there's a basis in Robert's Rules of Order with all of these conventions. So any questions before we get into specifics of precinct conventions? Okay, let's talk about precinct conventions. If you've not been to a precinct convention, probably the most important thing that you need to know is to show up and to go to the right convention. So in Harris County, we've got these grouped conventions that you're having maybe 15, 20, 30 conventions in a single room that are all happening separately. You need to make sure that you're going to your correct convention and not to, hey, I know that person, I'm going to go just join their convention. You can't do that. Qualifications, you need to be a registered voter, obviously. You have to establish party affiliation, which for 99% of us means that we voted in the primary, right? Although there is a sideways way of becoming affiliated. You take an oath of affiliation, you say I'm a Republican, and then you can participate in the precinct convention. Now, normally these are small groups. How many of you have been to a precinct convention with more than a dozen people before? That's awesome. So I think the most common in Harris County, the median precinct convention size is about 2. Which means that there are a lot of precinct conventions that consist of one person. I heard that there was one precinct one time that had one delegate to the SD convention, and the husband and wife showed up and they had to flip a coin to decide who the delegate was. So, they are small groups, and whoever shows up from the precinct who's eligible to be there can participate. Well, what do you do in a precinct convention? Y'all remember? What happens in a precinct convention? You pass resolutions. So first step toward making your state platform is at those precinct conventions. People are able to bring whatever they want. Anything that interests them involved in policy, in whether it be party policy or legislation, you bring it. That's the first step in becoming the platform. What's the other thing you do in a precinct convention? Elect delegates. So you've got this stair step where you start with precinct convention. You go to SD or county convention. You go to state convention, and then you go to national if you're so inclined. So those are really the two things that precinct conventions do. And there is one no-no, which is my second to last point there, which is don't add delegates after adjournment. You need to go into a precinct convention knowing, sometimes people can't go to a precinct convention for whatever reason. They've got another obligation. You need to talk to those people in advance and know who's going to come out of your precinct to be elected delegate to your county or SD convention. No excuse for not following the rules, and if you don't follow the rules, you're potentially subject to some penalties. So don't get nervous about it, but really just follow the script. That's important. Any questions about precinct conventions? Yes, sir.
It says legible paperwork.
That means you don't write the paperwork, Dave. That means you don't get to write your paperwork, Dave.
That's the legible part. But what about with time? Does it mean on time or with the time that you do things inside the convention?
So the question that he has is about the timing. Well, what does that mean? State party rules say that you have 2 days. If you've got a precinct convention that occurs before your Senate district convention, you've got 2 days to put it in the mail, or 3 days to turn it in person at party headquarters.
Okay.
Now for Fort Bend, I think there's a 30-minute rule in there that says you have 30 minutes to get your paperwork together.
But Shane doesn't let people out the door until they turn in their
And I think that's good practice, that with precinct conventions, don't let people leave the room with them. And in Harris County, now that we've got grouped conventions in Harris County, we're trying to keep a tight lid on that because if that paperwork escapes, sometimes you don't get it back, and that's going to disqualify people. Let's talk about county and SD conventions. So as we said before, fourth Saturday in March at the time set by your county party. Counties that are all in one SD have a county convention. Counties that are in multiple SDs like Fort Bend or Harris, we have SD conventions. So those conventions are started off by a temporary chair. I think Tina Gibson's going to be Fort Bend SD 17 temporary chair.
Rob is
Brazoria 17.
Yes.
So those conventions come together. They don't just materialize. You've got these temporary chairs who are working weeks and weeks in advance to get committees together. And those committees are going to include credentials and rules, organization, resolutions, nominations. Legislative priorities is a new one that's optional. Those committees can meet before the convention. If they do, they have to provide notice. You can't just have a secret meeting of your convention committees. And again, that speaks to the openness of the process, that we really want people to come in advance and participate and be a part of that and talk. You've got these resolutions that came from the precinct level. What are you going to do with them? You're going to have a resolutions committee that's going to try to formulate a document from your county or SD convention that says these are the things that we believe in, that we care about. Try to get people around the state to believe in the same things, and hopefully you can get that into the platform. So those conventions are going to meet on that Saturday. They're going to follow the agenda. That agenda is set out in state party rules. And hopefully they pass resolutions, that they have a good debate on resolutions that they're going to forward to state convention. We're going to talk about the form that those resolutions should take in a little bit. And just as you did at the precinct level, you're also going to be electing delegates and alternates to the state convention. Any questions on how those conventions happen or how committees work? So continuing, I put here, ask not what you can do for your country /county, because these conventions, as I said before, they don't just materialize, they take work. So I would encourage you as strongly as possible to talk to your county chair, to talk to your temporary convention chairs, and ask them, what can I do for you to help organize? Can I serve on a committee? If you're a precinct chair, you should be part of that process too. If you're not, find out who your precinct chair is. And try to recruit like-minded volunteers to get more people involved. This is our opportunity to drive the party. This is our opportunity to drive interest in the election. I think conventions are vital for building up energy for the election. So it's not just a random step that you do. It's something that brings your party together in a physical way. Let's talk about state convention now. So state convention is going to be that week of May 20th through 25th. What happens on the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday? Well, the temporary committees begin meeting. How many of you have testified or visited or been a part of temporary committee meetings? I know Bobby has. If you haven't, try to block off some time for that. Go to the rules committee if you're into rules. Go to platform committee. Go to ledge priorities. Those are committees that do the bulk of the work at state convention. Credentials are also important. And then the whole convention will get together on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday for the general sessions. Those are when thousands of people are gathered together. You've also got your caucuses. Since this is going to be a presidential year, you've got SD caucuses. At the SD caucus, you're going to elect your state leaders. You're going to make a recommendation on state chair and vice chair. You're going to elect your SREC members and permanent members of the committees, which is kind of a misnomer. People are like, well, they're permanently on the committee. Actually, the permanent committees only exist for a couple days, whereas the temporary committees have existed for weeks and weeks. So as it is going to be a presidential year, you've also got congressional district, or CD caucuses for short. Those are going to elect delegates to national convention as well as your presidential elector. So I always like to remind people who forget that we don't actually vote directly for president, and the Constitution doesn't have us do that. We vote for electors. So those electors in Texas are chosen at state convention. The human being who actually gets to vote for president on our behalf is chosen by our state delegates. Side little story, 15-second story. I understand that people who have served in that position will get like thousands of pieces of mail. Did you? What year was it? 16?
2016.
And you got like buckets of mail from like Germany and Japan and all sorts of different places?
Mostly New York.
So that's not to discourage you from running for elector, by the way, but big responsibility comes with some mail. I want to encourage you guys also, apart from the statutory end of state convention, it's really fun. And it's a great opportunity to meet people, to work with people, to get to know people, not only from your district, but from across the state. If you've got particular interests in, education or energy policy or whatever it is that drives your participation in the party, environmental policy, you're going to find people at state convention who have similar ideas that you can network with. Encourage you to go to events. Have some fun at state convention. Don't just attend the caucuses. A little more about state convention. If you want to get into the nitty-gritty of rules, I won't bore you with that, but there are some rule citations here for what happens, what governs all of the different activities, both official and unofficial, at state convention. I've been blessed to be a national delegate. It's an amazing thing. It's actually smaller than state convention. There are more delegates at state convention than national. Of course, at national, you've got like media in your face who want to know what you think. I was interviewed. I got put on NPR. Should have had Bobby's training before I got ambushed by NPR. But someone in Houston, like the 6 people who listen to NPR, one of them heard me on there. And I just thought of Apollo 13 where they're like, well, what do you think about the mission? And they said, well, I'm proud, I'm happy, and I'm thrilled. So that's what I said. I'm proud and happy and thrilled to vote for our nominee. So I'm going to go through resolutions real quick. I I want you to realize that a typical resolution, if you've ever written resolutions for an organization, this is a really nicely written one, really nicely formatted. State convention does not want your nice resolutions. What they want is concise. Because the goal of a resolution passed by your county or SD convention is to make a change in the platform. It's a very specific and concrete thing. So if we're going to change the platform, we've got to know what the platform looks like. Well, what does the platform look like? Platform is a bunch of simple statements. You can almost think of them as kind of tweet length if you know what that is. It's about 2 sentences, 3 sentences. There are some that are a little bit longer. But they've got a topic. They get to the point. There are no whereases. There are no resolves. It's just a simple statement of policy. And you've got to think that someone is on the receiving end of these resolutions. So they've got to group these. If you divide, when you write your resolutions, if you group them in one of those 9 sections that are already in the platform, they're going to love you. If you don't, they're not going to love you. They don't want to have to rewrite your resolutions for you. So just realize that the current platform is about 274 planks, but they're all very, very specific and targeted, each one of those planks. I won't get too much into this, only to say that the state platform in 2024 is going to be based on the state platform in 2022. So that's part of the rule that says we work from the old platform and we add or delete into making a new platform. Let's talk about bad resolutions for a sec. What is a bad resolution? Well, you don't want to have something that doesn't scan. If it's not in text, they're not going to like that. Number 2, even worse, if you've got images, maybe you wrote it on a napkin, wrote your resolutions on a napkin, or maybe you just wrote them out. Realize that somebody is going to be on the receiving end of that at the Republican Party of Texas, a volunteer like yourself. Actually, the person who supplied me with these images, these are actual ones that they got, and she had to hand type like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resolutions that were sent to her last time. So be merciful to these people. And one more really bad one. The Post-it note that you see on the right was actually something that was submitted from a county or SD convention. I can't even tell if that's a yes or a no. And then the one on the left, they're like, oh, just see our other document. We're not going to do any work for you. So we know what a bad resolution looks like. What does a good resolution look like? Remember, you're trying to amend the existing platform. Try to be innovative. If it's something that's in there already, you probably don't need to speak on it again. So familiarize yourself with the current platform. I know a lot of us are really active in pro-life stuff or Second Amendment stuff. That's not uncommon, within our party, and we're fortunate that we've got some principled people. Don't say something that's in there already, like we support gun rights, we're pro-life. It's got to be more specific than that. And it should be an electronic copy. As said before, it should be concise, and it should fit neatly into one of the 9 categories that's already in the platform. They're not going to change those headers more than likely, so stick to one of those 9. Don't make it multi-part. Don't write a 300-word resolution. Make it a couple sentences, 3, 4 sentences at the most. Again, no whereases. So what will they look like when you're done? They're going to have your county name. They're going to have your SD. They're going to say that they passed. Notice you've got on the example at the top something about national defense and border security. That's one of those 9 categories that's in the existing platform. And then you state your case. Repel the invasion at the border. Maybe you've got government and election integrity. Notice, same headers, succinct titles. I want you to also notice the phrasing. You're going to have phrasing like we support or Texas should, we urge, we believe. That's how the platform is written. So as you think about these resolutions in the weeks and months to come, look at the current platform and see that you're conforming to that standard. Be clear, be innovative. I picked out one that's really long. and actually, Beatty, this is one for you on climate. This is about the longest plank in the platform. So anything, and even though it's long, every sentence there has a direction. You know, it's not just crazy. It's very specific and targeted. So that's what a resolution should look like. I want to wrap things up here. A little bit of perspective. So we've got these rules and standards. I encourage you to read to be a prepared delegate. You know, read those rules. Read the platform. Those are really the two documents that you should make sure to read carefully so that you've done your homework. You'll be a good delegate. But also don't forget, as I said before, that conventions are about people. You know, conventions are a place where we interact with friends. We meet new friends. Don't forget that. We're here to defend Texas. We're here to save America. We wouldn't be here in this room on a Saturday morning if we didn't believe in that, if we didn't believe in defending our country, defending our state, making Texas a better place. So conventions are important to that goal, and I really encourage you guys to be part of the process as volunteers in advance of convention, to show up at the convention, and then to support the party after the convention and continue that dialogue. Make sure that you don't just show up every 2 years and then disappear.